Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. We talk about different categories of wellness and seeking balance between them. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well. This is episode 26. A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people, including as part of a reconciliation process. We make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are all treaty people, with responsibilities to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land. We are back. It's Let's Be Well Together podcast, and it's John and Sammy. So we came across a social media post that talks about baggage you don't need to carry. And this was on the Mental Health Commission of Canada's Instagram page. And it's a picture with some suitcases, and each one has a different point. And the baggage you don't need to carry includes your past, guilt, expectations, others' mistakes, and negativity. So do any of those jump out at you, Sammy?
Yeah, honestly, quite a few.
They all jump out to me.
They all, yeah. I could probably relate to every single one of those. I'll talk about expectations.
Sure.
So for myself, I feel like I have a lot of high expectations for me. And I don't know if that comes from my past or if that is just
it's also the time of your life.
Time of your life, yeah. I've always really had high expectations for myself, though. Whether it was, grade 4 and I really wanted to do well at the science fair, or now where, I have high expectations of where am I going to go? What do I want to do with my life? Right. And I also, having expectations for others too. Right. So when you think of like past relationships, and then when you're with someone else, you kind of carry those, which I guess also goes on your past. You carry that into your next relationship, and you might have either higher expectations for them, or you expect them to act different because you told them about what happened in your past relationship. So you have these expectations that they're going to be completely different and 100% perfect all the time, when that's not the case. Well,
what's funny about what you said too, you have high expectations. There's actually a nuance there, because I think what you mean by that is you wanted to achieve great things.
Yeah.
And you were going to push yourself to do that type idea, right?
Definitely.
That you could push yourself. Well, believe it or not, when I was younger, I was probably pretty arrogant. Like I found school pretty easy. I really loved it. Like I was a total book nerd and I loved school.
Yeah.
But I had high expectations, but in a weird way, which was, I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do.
Right.
I'm just going to keep learning. And some amazing thing's just going to pop up. I know it.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to approach things.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I had some sobering moments on that path.
Yeah. But, I've talked with David about that too, because we compare our different experiences in university. And when it came to like exams and multiple choice, I would calculate what grade I needed to get to be able to pass the class. Even though I had like a 80 or something in the class, I needed to know what was the lowest score I needed to pass and what was like the highest score that would like make me fail or something. Like I needed to know that, but he was like, why would you do that? That just psychs you out. So he was probably similar in the way that he was just like, I know it, I studied, I'm good to go, versus I need to know every single expectation, I guess. Like what can I expect depending on the different outcomes? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, because I'm having a hard time with this one as being baggage.
Yeah.
So, because I do think, I agree with expressions like if you don't set the bar high enough, or if you don't look up, you might not see how far you can go and all that stuff like that. I think there's a good expectation. So I think maybe what I need to think about is, in what sense are other people's expectations imposed on me, or in what sense am I imposing unrealistic or expectations on myself, or expectations that are causing me to lose balance in other areas or mistreat people, that type of stuff.
Yeah, like what expectations are affecting you within your everyday life, that are affecting your own mental health, that are affecting your own love and relationships. What is happening there? Because there definitely are some good expectations that you can have for yourself, and that might just be more as like goals, right? Goals versus expectations. Like expectations almost, in my mind, kind of set you up for failure at times, because you're expecting this thing, and then if you don't get it, you're a failure.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. It's that you're judging yourself by the expectations, as opposed to setting goals.
Yes.
and possibly achieving them, but even if you don't, learning from them and moving on. I love that.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at your past,
Yeah.
not everything in my past is baggage.
No,
Lots of great
not.
stuff.
Yeah. And there's good baggage and there's bad baggage.
So I think the point there again, I mean, this is always, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray.
Exactly.
We need to be thinking about, are you carrying some baggage from your past that's preventing you from moving forward, or bogging you down, or keeping your head spinning in the past?
Definitely keeping you in that spot and carrying it with you is the main thing. And I think with your past, you really do need to do some digging and looking inward on what in my past is affecting my present. What am I carrying with me through my life?
That's a good one. And what about guilt? I mean, guilt.
Yeah,
I think you and I, unfortunately, this one weighs heavy.
Guilt, yeah. I think a lot of
what do
people
you do
have
with
guilt.
it?
Yeah, with me for guilt, it's hard to address, but I think that, so if I'm guilty about whether I did something to someone, which typically for me, that's where it would come from. I feel like I didn't treat someone the way they deserve to be treated or something like that. So for me, it is about addressing the situation and talking with the person, and then that helps relieve my guilt and maybe makes them feel better. But what I've noticed is that I might feel really guilty about something. I bring it up to the person and they're like, I have never thought
that was a nothing better.
Yeah, they're like, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, that has been weighing on my chest for weeks, and then sometimes I still think about it and I bring it up again and they're like, it's been 2 years. You already apologized for it, So yeah, guilt can be heavy.
The thing is, so first of all, how do you get yourself, don't you feel awkward bringing it up?
I have to be like very comfortable with the person. Like, I have to be like very, I feel, I have a good friendship with them or a good relationship with them where I feel like it's a safe space where they're going to be able to have the conversation and speak in like a mature space, I guess, you know?
One of the things I say in my book is that, unfortunately, I'm not one of these people who has no regrets. I have lots of regrets.
Yeah.
And one of the problems I have actually combines two things. So some of the things I regret the most is if I mistreated somebody. And a lot of times that's happened in the past and I don't connect with those people anymore. So it just eats away at me. There's no way to kind of resolve it. All I can really do is, I suppose I could
reach out
to them.
Yeah.
I haven't yet had the ability to do that.
Yeah, I've had similar situations where you kind of, friendships from the past, they just didn't grow with you, but you still miss that person. Either you were when you were with them, and it's just kind of you grew out of each other almost, but you still have so much love and care for that person that you want to make sure they're doing well.
Well, and in me, I'm older, so these aren't all just great friends.
Yeah.
These are acquaintances or
right.
people I met in passing, but I still, this is one of the things I'll be struggling with, I think, for a long time, because even though I talk about bringing myself to the present, this is often when I do it. I'm spinning backwards, wishing I could rewrite history, wishing I could not have said that thing that I said.
Right.
And really, so far, that is baggage I don't need to carry. So my way of trying to deal with it is I try and focus on my breath. I try and bring myself back to the present moment.
Yeah.
Try and use my senses for the things that are around me. And if I'm lucky, I'll break out of that spin. But it certainly is baggage that's really heavy for me.
Definitely.
Other people's mistakes, that's not one I really don't like. And you might have lots to say about that. I don't really.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. And I think for me, it's because I've like done a lot of reflection on this. Like I try to have control over situations. And if I feel like I'm losing control of what's going on, I will feel anxious and maybe get a little depressed and you just not feel my best, which is something I need to work on. I need to learn about. I can't control what others do. That is something I definitely deal with. So when someone makes a choice or a decision that I wouldn't have done, and I feel like it's a mistake, because who are you really to say someone made a mistake, right? It's their life.
Okay, because I've been thinking of it as someone else made a mistake that hurt me. As opposed to I see someone making a mistake and I want to correct it.
Right.
So on the first point, for example, I find that myself, and I think a lot of people, I easily forgive other people who make mistakes.
Definitely.
That hurt me.
Me too.
I'm like, it's okay. Let's just get it right going forward or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
You're taking it as
when
Sammy,
others, yes,
you're ruining your life. You can't do that.
yeah, and I want to fix it. I want to make sure that they're going, because I have so much love and care for them, but that's nothing I'll ever be able to control. So by feeling like I have some sort of say or control over somebody else's decisions is just never going to work.
And really, you're not really one to be the best judge of whether or not they're making a mistake.
Exactly. It's their life. They deserve to live what they want to.
So negativity, that's the last one. And I do really want to say something about this one. And, I put it on the website. It's something I really, really feel important about. Ever since I've taken the active approach of trying to choose optimism, things have felt better for me. And so I often will think of the negative, and I'm trying to force myself to be more positive. I'm trying to change my thinking. And I certainly am always trying to choose optimism whenever that's possible.
Yeah, I agree. I'm someone who is trying to stay positive and optimistic. However, I do have like some negative thoughts, but for me, this one I can also kind of relate to when others are negative around me. I really feel it. So
you feed off of it.
I feel like it's just like I take on their negativity, and it's not like then I get really negative. It's just that I can feel their negative energy, and I feel like I have to make everything better, which isn't great. So I definitely, just the negativity around me can affect my own mental health.
So that's something to be aware of.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And because again, I can't fix everything. I can't make, if someone's feeling negative or feeling upset, that's okay that they can, they're allowed to feel those emotions. And I shouldn't have to feel like I have to make it better.
Well, I love this kind of post because we have to carry around so much with us. And for somebody to say, hey, John, hey, Sammy, be aware of some of these as maybe being bad baggage. Yeah. That helps us be more self-aware.
Definitely.
And hopefully lightens our load.
100%.
Guests are giving their time. Expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the categories of social and mental wellness. We are chatting with Jason Balgopal, who spearheaded an initiative for peer support groups. Jason's a lawyer. He's been an assistant Crown attorney in Scarborough, Ontario since 2004, which is similar to being a district attorney in the US. He's appeared at all levels of court and has conducted all manner of prosecutions, including murder trials. He's a member of the Elder Abuse Consultation Team in Toronto and has presented many times on the topic of elder abuse. He's also a member of the Scarborough Human Services and Justice Coordinating Committee, which helps to coordinate the various services offered by different organizations to a diverse population. After a lengthy challenge with depression, and after getting to a better headspace for himself, Jason wanted to give back to the community which had supported him. In 2015, he created the Mental Wellness Peer Support Groups, which have been operating ever since in person and more recently through Zoom. The groups offer members an opportunity to unburden themselves to peers who have walked a mile in their shoes about how their mental wellness challenge is affecting them and to get feedback, empathy, or best practices to support them. Welcome, Jason.
John, thank you very much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, and I appreciate your time. I saw you present to representatives of law associations across Ontario, and I was intrigued by your initiative, and I appreciate your efforts. So maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how all this started.
Sure. Well, I'm a lawyer, as you say, and I've been so since 1999. And things were going along quite well. I joined the prosecution service here in Toronto in 2004. And as a bit of a perfectionist, it's a difficult profession to be in as a lawyer, a good one sometimes, but certainly as a prosecutor, it can be very challenging because the way the system is set up is innocent until proven guilty. And with my perfectionist nature, I just ended up finding that I was not meeting the high expectations that I had set for myself. And not too slowly, but very surely, I ended up going into a fairly deep depression. Started in about 2004 and ultimately lasted about 10 years. I was very fortunate, though. I got a lot of support. I had a psychiatrist, I had a psychologist, and I had a very loving family and a very, very supportive wife.
Can I just ask a question about that?
Yeah.
If it was a period of 10 years, Was there a time before you really recognized it in that fashion and it, eventually determined I need to reach out for help, or were you getting help right from the start?
No. There definitely was a process of awareness and finding out what was actually going on. Why am I acting this way? Why am I sleeping more? Why am I drinking more? Why am I cranky? Why am I lashing out at people and acting just illogically because there's something going on upstairs in my brain, which just isn't right. So that did take a while. And, I say I had a great psychiatrist, but that wasn't the first one I had. I had a psychiatrist before and we just didn't click. And there definitely is something about that aspect of it. And the psychiatrist prescribed medication for me, and the medication certainly was helpful. All of those things were helpful. In fact, the fact that there were so many different aspects of the help that I got, I kind of likened to a web of support. It's not just one thread that you can just say, well, it's a magic bullet, I'm going to get medication, that's going to be the end of it. It's a whole web of support that helps you to get through these kinds of challenges.
And if you look back, do you see that as being necessary? Like, can you think of getting to where you are now had you not had the web, but only one or two or three of those pieces?
For myself, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I needed all of the pieces in that web all the threads in that web to make it happen. Other people may not. And part of it perhaps was the length of time it took me to recognize and understand and get the help. There's a reticence about getting help. It's, my gosh, you have a mental health challenge. And back then we didn't even call it that. I don't call it an illness. I call it a challenge. But back then it was a mental health illness. And there's a lot of stigma, certainly 20 years ago. And even now, there's a lot of stigma about that kind of challenge that people face. So going to a psychiatrist, my gosh, you must be really bad shape, buddy. And that took a while to get over, but it took a while to get over the fact that I was going to be on medication at one point, I thought, for the rest of my life.
So going back to where you were after this challenge and after these 10 years, you came out of it, and what happened at that point?
Well, so I got into a better headspace, as I like to say, and I was certainly feeling better. And one of the things that I wished I had was somebody to talk to other than my wife, other than my family, because I was just burning them out. To a certain degree, with the depression and the anxiety that I had, I kept coming back to them and saying the same stories over and over again. The same issues were bedeviling me, and they had no lived experience. They had no clinical experience to help me. All they could say was, well, talk to your psychiatrist, talk to your doctor, do whatever they say.
But it's a good point, because I hadn't really thought about it in that context before, because we often say when we're talking about some of our topics that you don't necessarily immediately need to go to a professional. You can talk, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, but until you mentioned that, it never occurred to me, you probably need something in between that as well. There's probably something different, so you're not always talking to the same people, especially if you're reliving a similar problem over a period of years.
And that missing middle was what was not there for me. And what do you do? What do you do in life when something's not there that you need? Well, you create it. That's what I did anyway. And I definitely wanted to give back to the community. Here in Canada, that I got that support and help I need, by and large, with government-provided healthcare. Certainly, there was a lot of out of cost for a variety of things, medications and some of the therapy, but a lot of it was covered by the government healthcare system. And I was very thankful for that. And so I wanted to give back. And so one of the things that I looked at, and as I say, was to look for people who had walked a mile in my shoes, people who had an experience of what I was going through, though they would not be the people to ever give me or prescribe for me medication. They might be the people who actually say, listen, Jason, you know what? When I was in your shoes, I did X, Y, Z, and I found it worked really well, which is exactly what I thought. When I went to the doctor, the psychiatrist, they would tell me this is the best thing that research shows you should do. And often it worked. But I always had in the back of my mind this thought that, well, what do you know? You're wearing a white lab coat type thing, a white doctor's coat. Is this really going to work or not? And what experience do you have?
I have to admit, when I read your intro and I read the part about walk a mile in your shoes, I think I glossed over that in my mind. But now that you're explaining it, it makes so much sense that, as we often, another thing we talk about on our show a lot is active listening, being empathetic in the listening, being non-judgmental. But what a difference it would make if you're also talking to people who've had similar or analogous experiences.
Well, not only are they able to understand what you're going through, I had a confidence that when they were listening to me, they were interested in what I had to say. Because when we set the groups up, I mean, I come home from work and I unburden myself to my wife. Well, she's kind of stuck there. She has to listen to me, kind of. That's the relationship. That's the way it is. But when you go to a mental wellness peer support group, the people there are there for them to get help, but they're also there to give help to other people. And so you know that when you're there talking to these people, they actually want to listen to you. They actually want to listen to what you're saying, and they actually have suggestions about what worked well for them.
Well, that's amazing. Now, given time constraints, maybe I could jump you to talk a little bit about the mechanics. Like how does it work? What does a group look like? And then ultimately we should talk about how other people who might be interested can find these peer support groups.
Absolutely. So we started off in person with in-person meetings, and that was fantastic. It very similar to an AA experience in as much that you're in the basement of a community center or a church or whatever. There's no 12 steps or anything like that. The system is run the same way, whether it's in person or we've now pivoted to a lot of meetings by Zoom. And it goes like this. Everybody gets an amount of time. Often I aim for the meetings to be about an hour so that people have a sense that they can get in and get out and they don't have to spend all night. So they might have 5-10 minutes and they have an opportunity to get off their chest what's bothering them. Just tell the group what's bothering you. After that, they can get feedback. Now, feedback is simply one of two things, either empathy or what's worked for somebody else. The one thing we won't do in the group is tell people what they should or shouldn't do. Now, I'm not a doctor. None of the other people are doctors or professionals. So we're not going to tell you what to do. But hey, John, that sounds like a really tough thing you've been going through. I'm really sorry. Listen, I went through something similar and I did X, Y, Z.
And I suppose sometimes you tell them what didn't work. So this did work, but by the way, if you're talking about that other thing, it didn't work well for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that's really, really useful for people because, they'll get a lot of suggestions from their friends, their families, and professionals. And we don't want to counter what the professionals say. Listen, that's what the doctor has told you. Well, listen, go with it. But I'll tell you, man, the side effects that I experienced on that medication were strong, or X, Y, Z, whatever the issue is.
I'm certainly going to make sure I include some contact information in the show notes that people can find on their whatever platform they use to listen to our show. But who would be the kind of person that might be interested? Are they professionals? Are they tradespeople? Are they everybody? And how would that person find these groups?
So our groups are open to anyone, not only anyone who has a mental wellness challenge themselves, but somebody who's supporting somebody. They're confidential and free. So I'm not going to tell you what happens specifics in the group, but I have seen in the past that people have come with family members because the family member gets a better understanding of what they can do to support their person. And they also get feedback from other people about, the person you're supporting does have a challenge. And it's a very important way so that they can see an insight into these challenges. So we obviously have a website, and it's www.mentalwellness.help. For both the in-person and the meetings that are run by Zoom, we have a sign-up sheet. And the sign-up sheet is run through meetup.com. Meetup is simply just a way of signing up for various groups. You can sign up for variety of different types of things in the world. We use it so you can sign up for any group you wish to attend.
Is Meetup, I take it that's not your kind of proprietary site. So do you have to punch in some search term when you're on Meetup to find your groups?
Absolutely. So when on Meetup, people should look for mental wellness peer-to-peer support groups. And the groups are private. That is, on Meetup, unless you've signed up for our group, you won't see all the details about what's happening there. We do ask people to sign up with just basic information. Only, it could be an initial for your name. You don't even have to put your full name at all. Certainly no photos or anything like that. And we do just ask for brief information so that we can make sure that the person who's coming in is actually somebody who is a good fit for the group, who has a mental wellness challenge, and we can help them.
What would the first experience look like? So let's say me, John Webster, I sign up on Meetup. I give you some basic information and you say, yep, you're somebody who could be part of this group. what would I see and what would I experience on the first time?
So then you'd go onto the meetup site and look at the calendar and decide which group is for you, which day works for you, which meeting. When you sign up for that particular meeting, you get a link if it's on a Zoom, if it's a virtual one, or you can go directly to the physical address. And when you get there, or you're on the Zoom link, you'll be welcomed into the group. Normally, we put people who are first timers sort of in the middle of the sharing session, so that people who have been at the group before can have an opportunity to share themselves, and you can see how the sharing happens and see how the feedback happens. And then you are obviously given enough time that you can share whatever's on your mind. But nobody's obliged to share. You can come and just be there. As we always say, being there is enough.
Well, it's amazing. And I'm a really big proponent of brainstorming and trying to find practical solutions when you're presented with problems. And I just love what you've created and what you're building. And I'm hoping that it helps a lot of people. I'm hoping that some people can connect with you now that they know it exists. And here we are. Now, before I turn, there's a question I ask every guest, but before I turn to that, is there anything else you wanted to communicate to the listeners before we move forward?
I think the one thing I'd want to let people know is there's just no downside to joining. So the most you lose is you lose 1 hour of your time, but the most you gain is support from people who have been down this road before, some greater ideas about how you can help yourself, and a community of people who are there for you. Really, the people in these meetings look out for the other people who come in, are very concerned about them. And I am surprised at how positive an experience this has been, not only for me as a person who facilitates these meetings, but me as a person who goes to these meetings and attends them. It's amazing how no longer do I feel lonely and alone in my journey.
We've talked to several guests about how great it feels to help other people. And what I think is really great about your program too is not only are you getting help, but you have an opportunity to help others. And that has to be rewarding as well.
Absolutely. I facilitate only one of the many groups that we run each week. And the facilitators are people who just make sure the group runs smoothly. But those people are also peers, people who have gone through the program before, people who have been in the groups for a number of times. And those people have told me consistently how much they get out of the program by being there to help other people. So I think it's a win-win situation for anybody who's attending the groups or eventually moves on to a situation where they're able to be part of leading the groups.
Well, you can imagine with a podcast that's called Let's Be Well Together, it sounds like an excellent program from our perspective. So let me turn you to the question we ask every guest. Our show is about having different categories of wellness in our lives. And we each have the categories that are important to us. Essentially, what I'm going to ask is what I call a mini wellness check-in. So here we go. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you even think of one activity you could do to foster wellness in that area?
Sadly, there is an area of my personal wellness that I have neglected, and it's my physical health. I'm not particularly a really active fellow, and that has caught up with me as I've aged. And so what I've had to do recently, and I'm doing much more actively, is going to physiotherapy to get into better health anyway. And then I'm going to be just doing more activity, getting out, doing stuff. The pandemic has been really challenging. I've been sitting at a desk for the last 2 years, not getting up, moving around and doing things like I normally do. And I've just got to get back out there doing physical activity.
I'm a lawyer like you. I let physicality slip completely. I think probably more than you. And I just can't tell you how great it feels if you can get back into regular aerobic exercise. To me, that was the key. But also adding some core and strength. It makes a huge difference, and it makes me enjoy living all the time that much more. So I wish you the best of luck in that. And Jason, again, thanks for such a great initiative, and thanks for sharing your ideas with us on our show today.
Oh, John, thank you for having me. This is fantastic. Your podcast is fantastic. I'm just really honored to be part of it. Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about music theory, And it's a part of music that you probably already know intuitively, but I want to break it down a bit more so you have a nice, cool understanding of what actually is going on. You might remember from several episodes ago, we talked about chord functions and about a really interesting interval, that's the distance between two notes, called a tritone, or as it was once called, the devil's interval, a really crunchy sound. It sounds like this. Crunchy, right? You might remember that was forbidden way back in the day. Now, in music, as in most things, there are rules, and the rules are there to make sure that things work well together and that things sound good. And depending on the style of music, the rules are either more strict or more lax. And, as in many other things that have rules, sometimes you can bend or even break those rules. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. There's an interval in music known as a perfect fifth. It sounds like this. Now, by itself, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, the way that I teach this to students when they're learning to hear these for the first time is that it's the first two notes of the Star Wars theme. Ba 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 da 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 da. Right? Yeah. Perfect fifth. There's a rule with these, though, that you're not supposed to go from one perfect fifth to another perfect fifth. This phenomenon is known as parallel fifths, and especially in the world of classical music, it's a great big no-no. The reason for this is that a perfect fifth, for most people, can sound sort of hollow or difficult to discern between the two notes. It can almost sound like one note, especially when there are other notes happening at the same time. So, if you've got a bunch of these moving from one to the next consecutively, it becomes really easy to lose track of what the heck's going on. So that's why the rule exists. And this is, of course, super simplified, but that's the gist of it. So why bother talking about this? Well, history aside, there are some really cool things where, or songs, I should say, where this rule has been broken. And it's been broken in such a way that all of a sudden, it sounds really good. There's a really famous example that I'm pretty sure most of you will have heard because it made huge rounds on the radio not too long ago. And that's Happy by Pharrell Williams. You know, great tune, really fun, makes you happy. But the chorus is chock full of this broken rule. It's basically non-stop parallel fifths. And what's cool is, if you were to rearrange these same notes, you get chords that work perfectly well. For those of you who are a little further along in your music and you feel like checking it out, it basically goes from a D flat major 7 to a C minor 7 to an F7. And by itself, that's totally fine. It's a flat 6 major 7 to a 5 minor to a 1 dominant, which is a little weird, but it sounds cool, right? What's interesting, though, is that if you look at the way that they've voiced these notes in particular, it's parallel fifths all in the left hand and parallel fifths all in the right hand at the same time. Let's break it down. Recognize that? That's the chorus, right? And by itself, it sounds sweet. But if we separate the two hands, you can maybe hear what I'm talking about. Here's the left. It's got a very clunky sound, and the proper term for this sound is actually parallel organum, which, fun fact, is what monks used to sing in either perfect fifths or perfect fourths, moving in parallel. The same thing can be heard in the right hand, and you'll maybe hear that devil's interval at the end here. Check it out. Clunky and then crunchy. Weird by itself, right? So these rules, no parallel fifths, and the really old school rule of, avoid the tritone, which, to be fair, is no longer an issue in modern music. Tritone's one of my favorites. That crunchy sound is super helpful. But breaking this rule, when we do it the right way, makes for a really iconic and happy sound. Here it is all together once more. throw some background vocals in there, change the sound up from a grand piano. In this case, it's electronic, but, bear with me, into something like an old case, or maybe even a whirly if you're feeling brave. Get some drums, get the main melody in there, and you've got yourself a hit song. That's all I've got for you today. A little glimpse into the world of music theory and how knowing stuff that kind of seems useless in the modern day is actually really helpful for analyzing tunes that make the rounds and end up being super popular. I hope you learned something. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
If you like what we're doing and enjoy the show, please spread the word about us. Connect with us on social media. Follow our Instagram account. It's at lets.be.well.together. Please also subscribe to us and rate us on your favorite podcast platform.
Move that body like we're meant to do. Hi, everyone. It's Sheila here, and we are back with Brian. I don't know if you listened earlier, but Brian is our neighbor, and he has recently retired about 4 years ago. And so he has bought an e-bike.
I have.
And he's going to talk about that. So how long has it been since you got your e-bike?
Probably about 3 years ago.
Okay.
I actually built it. I built it myself.
Oh, you built it yourself? Because I was going to ask you how expensive it is for an e-bike. Do you have any idea how expensive they are?
Well, from what I understand, they're probably around, for a decent one, it's probably around $2,500, $3,000.
Okay. And do they run on gas or?
Electric.
Electric. So you have to make sure it's charged?
Yes, you have a battery. You have a battery on your, an onboard battery, and it's going to be charged, and you should have a full charge when you go out.
So it's just like if you have an electric lawnmower or whatever,
electric car, whatever.
Electric car, yeah. And how long does the battery last?
It depends on the size. There's different sizes of batteries.
Okay.
Different voltages and that. But the one I have is a fairly big battery, and it lasts for about 85 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. So you just have to think about wherever you're going, how far you're going, you have to get back.
Yes.
So if it's good for 85, you probably shouldn't be going any further than 40 out.
Yes.
So it gives you
40 back. So now when you say 85, like if I'm not using it, like let's say I'm pedaling, I only use it to go uphill. Mm-hmm. Does it still count like the amount of distance that you do, whether you use it or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, you have the assist with the pedals.
Okay.
With an electric bike, they're a lot heavier than a regular bike, so you wouldn't want to be pedaling that without any assist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You wouldn't want to just shut the power off and pedal it yourself, because that would be. Yeah, you wouldn't get very far before you were exhausted. Oh,
okay. Because I just assumed that that's what happens. Like you have it set at a certain speed, and you're pedaling it yourself all the time, and then if you slow down, because I'd imagine going up hills would be harder and stuff, then it kicks in.
No,
it's basically always going.
It's always there, and you're pedaling, depending on how much power you set it at. There's usually about 5 levels of power.
Okay.
I usually set it at about 3, and then, nothing's really that hard.
Yeah.
You're pedaling, but you're really not putting a lot of effort or energy into it.
Right. And if you just use one, then you're using a lot of energy.
Yeah, you're using a bit more energy.
Right.
And usually I use one, and that would be if I was just riding with other people that didn't have an electric bike.
Mm-hmm,
then that way I can just kind of keep up at their speed and at their level.
Okay. And how fast can you go with your electric bike?
Mine will do about 60 kilometers.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I built it myself, so I don't have the restrictions that you have when you buy a manufactured bike.
So we should start a business.
Maybe we should. If you buy a manufactured bike, I think they're only allowed to do 32 kilometers.
Okay.
By law.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
So you can just kill them all out of the water.
Well, I've done 60 a couple of times, but it's pretty hairy on a bike.
Yeah, that would be really fast.
So I don't want to fall at this age doing 60 kilometers, because I would break into a million pieces.
I'm sure you would. That's funny. But so what has been some of your enjoyable experiences on your bike?
Actually, going down by the Grand River. You can know the Grand River,
yeah.
and there's a trail right down there, right over by Chicopee.
Yeah.
And there's it's from here. In fact, I went last night, and it's about a 20-kilometer round trip down the Grand River through Chicopee, over by Lackner Boulevard, then right down towards the Breslau area there, and back. And there's a hill there.
I was going to say, it's pretty hilly.
Very hilly there. So, and there's one hill there that I don't think anybody can get up on a regular bike, because it's like almost like at a 45-degree angle.
Yes.
And but I go up there quite easily, and it's kind of fun when people think, because my bike doesn't necessarily look like an electric bike, it just looks like a regular bike, so people think I'm some sort of professional biker or something like that when I go up there.
That's great. You got the gear and everything, and you're like, go in.
Exactly.
That's super. That's great. And what's the longest you've ever done?
The longest ride?
Yeah.
Probably about 65
kilometers
there and back.
Yeah.
And it's so nice when you get back, because it feels like you could go out again and do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you don't really use that much energy. No, I have to admit it's probably not as much exercise you get with a regular bike.
Right.
But it's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And you would go a lot farther.
Yeah.
And you're not afraid of hills, or taking on hills.
And you can completely control your speed, right?
Exactly,
so if you don't want to go too fast, just put it lower, and it still assists. So I think it's great for people who are worried about, just going too far or being too much, or right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice.
And you see a lot of older type people getting them now. They've become very popular.
Yes.
And because of, as we get older, we, lose some of our energy.
Yeah, you lose muscle mass. And
exactly. So with the older people, it gives them that option now. They can get out and get some exercise.
That's what we're trying to do, like push everyone to get out there. So hopefully that encourages people to maybe give us a little ping, and we can get your new business started, building e-bikes.
That would be great.
Anyways, I'm just kidding, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sheila.
Okay.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. I have some friends who are in politics, and they're pretty passionate about trying to make the world a better place, trying to make our community a better place. I was talking to them not in a political context. We were just shooting the breeze, but a couple of them were talking to each other about a really challenging situation that we have with people, homeless people, and also people who are drug dependent. And I can't remember the initials, but the safe injection sites and paying for drugs as opposed to people buying them on the street. So, that if you go to a safe injection site, there's safety there, there's medical help if you need it. In some cases, I guess, I don't know much about it, they'll even supply to make sure that the drug is safe. And you can imagine that raises a lot of controversy with people for, against, and the rest of it. And I'm not going to get into the pros and cons here, subject to saying I've heard some pretty compelling arguments why it's good to have these locations, especially if you can tie them in to resources where if people decide that they've had enough of that life, there's ways to maybe try and help them and give them resources and direct them to the right place. But the thing that came up when I was running today was one of them had said at one point, for a lot of people in this situation, even if they can break out of that lifestyle, it's not usually a complete break. So people, whether it's homeless or drug dependent, and you can think of other things, they get away from it for a while, but then they might slide back. And then they try and break away again. But there's definitely, from their experience, they see people, it's not a straight line. It's a few steps forward and one back, and some forward and two back. And it's easy to think, oh, well, that's other people in other contexts, doesn't apply to me. But what hit me today when I was running is that applies to a lot of us for a lot of things. And so, my challenge that I keep talking about is trying to stay at a healthy weight, and it's trying to keep physical exercise as an important aspect of my regular everyday life. Not because I'm an athlete, not because I'm training for something, but just because I know I feel better if I if I make physicality and exercise, aerobics, strength training, if I make that part of my everyday, I'm more human. I'm being my human self and I feel better. And I realize it's not a straight line for me either. There's weeks or even months where I take a few steps back and I don't get out enough, or I take a few steps back and I don't eat the right food. And that's okay. The point is, if, being self-aware and seeing that can happen, what it makes me think is I have to take more steps forward for every step back. And I share in common the same struggles that lots of people have, including homeless people and people who are drug dependent. And sweeping that under the rug isn't the answer. I think the answer is being aware of it and trying to find a way through it. And that's what hit me on my run today. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
Okay, so sometimes on flip side of the coin, I want to come up with some of the quotes from John's book. And today is one of those days. So the only thing is that this particular quote has a lot of philosophy stuff in it, or some. So I'm going to get John to read it because he knows how to pronounce all the words.
Yeah, it's not that bad. But okay, so here it is. So the context is, one of the things I was mentioning is people tend to fall into on a spectrum of dogmatism or skepticism. Yep. And I talked to Sammy about that on one of our shows.
Yeah.
But anyway, so here's the quote from the book, and it's talking about some ancient Greek philosophers before Socrates and Plato. Okay, so here we go. There was a line of ancient Greek philosophers associated with skepticism. Zeno was one of them, and he loved to come up with paradoxes. One paradox suggested that motion is an illusion. Imagine an archer shooting at a target. It's funny if you imagine this as a Monty Python skit, by the way. Logically, before the arrow can get to the target, it must first reach the halfway point. And from there, it must travel to the next halfway point. And so on. He argued that the arrow could never reach the target because it never stops traveling to an infinite number of halfway points. I doubt, however, that he tested his theory by letting someone shoot an arrow at him. He would have in a Monty Python skit.
For sure.
So the idea is, like we can use rationality. We can use...
Yeah, because mathematically that does make sense.
Well, in some way, on some level, it does make sense.
Yeah, because half and half, and it can be indefinitely going half and half.
Yeah, and I can't count to infinity.
No.
So it'll never reach the target.
Never, no.
But we know it reaches a target.
Yeah.
We see it all the time.
On trial for murder because they shot a gun and it killed someone.
Exactly. He got past all the halfway points.
It's just so funny, yeah.
And so the reason I mention it is just that skepticism, while maybe interesting to a degree, ultimately you got to move past it.
Right. And so they would talk about this and argue about this?
Well, there was a whole bunch of, they would come up with a lot. It's essentially what one of the issues is, can you actually explain what reality? Can you actually explain what it is you're seeing?
Right.
Actually a later one, Heraclitus. So the other thing I mentioned in the book is one of these people said, you can't step in the same river twice.
Right.
Because you step in it, you step out, when you step back, it's a different river.
Right.
So then another guy, Heraclitus, came up with these saying, no, you can't step in the same river once.
Oh, okay.
It's never the same river. It's
right.
constantly changing. And his skepticism got to the point, this is another thing we laugh about.
Right.
Where if you imagine just wriggling your index finger.
Yeah.
Okay, so he got to the point where no matter what anyone asked him, he could just wriggle his index finger. That's the answer. Oh. Because, you can't say anything. So that's all well and good. But, one of the points I'm trying to get across is let's not get caught up with the intellectual exercises all the time. You can't either you can't be too skeptical, but by the same token, you can't be too dogmatic.
Right.
And I just think that it's a really funny example. And
yeah.
And sometimes when, lately, there's so much skepticism.
Yeah.
But you heard it during COVID. You heard it all the time.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And because someone has an agenda.
Yeah.
And they're like, no matter what you say to me, I can poke holes in it.
Exactly.
I have to decide based on what I'm hearing, what the experts say, what the knowledgeable people say, what I accept as the most likely explanation for something at a given time. And they're pretty obvious. I'm not going to get into what they were during COVID, but it's pretty obvious what the right answers were.
Yeah.
But if you had an agenda, maybe you were very religious and you didn't think it was fair that you couldn't congregate or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
if you have an agenda, then obviously you're going to be able to find ways to poke holes in everything.
Right.
But I just don't think that's a way to live your life. I used to be really skeptical in my philosophy days at university.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate because I would never really be able to accept a way forward because I wanted to have the ultimate perfect answer first.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I realized a better way to live my life was to try and come to grips with what I think is the best explanation at any given time.
Right.
Move forward. Make decisions.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what you have to do in life. You have to just kind of balance all the opinions and balance all the equations and make a decision.
Being too skeptical or too dogmatic both have problems.
Yes.
Different ones, but they're both problematic. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
Right on. And we've reached the end of our episode for today. Thanks very much for listening. Obviously, Sammy's not here. It's Cameron joining you for the sign-off today. Obviously, with John and Sheila. Good to see you guys.
Hey.
Moving forward into this week, I'm looking forward to Friday because this Friday, one of those songs that I worked on, I played piano on, is being released. It's called Unbreakable You. I've been looking forward to its release since way back when it was recorded, and it's almost here.
That's exciting.
That's got to be so cool to hear what you play and then it shows up on an actual song.
It's kind of neat
in the
to
world.
hear yourself on Spotify or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's my highlight looking at this week. What's going on for you, Sheila?
Well, John's brother and wife came from Australia, so I had to pick them up at the airport and they were staying with us. So we had a few fun excursions with them, but the most memorable one was I learned how to make spring rolls. So his wife is from Thailand, so she's an excellent cook, and she taught me how to make spring rolls. So I'll have to make them for you, Cameron.
I would love to try some of those. Nice.
And we biked to the market, which was a lot of fun, the Kitchener Market, and we got a lot of farm fresh produce, and it was just so nice to have fresh, organic food. And what about you,
locally
John?
grown stuff.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, the market was fun. When I was there, I noticed that one place had a bunch of leeks and different kind of onions, and I have this onion soup recipe, and so it was really amazing to go home and make this 5 onion soup recipe with fresh bread, like homemade bread. It was crazy.
Homemade everything. Yeah, it was great.
So I had a great weekend. We had to run up to our Collingwood condo to do a couple little repairs, and that was easy enough. That's only about an hour away from where our daughter and her husband live in Owen Sound. So we got to visit them, and what was amazing was they recently moved into a place. Was it maybe a year ago? I can't even remember.
Almost a year. Yeah.
And they're within walking distance of a beach.
Mm-hmm.
So we walked down to this beach on the water, and I didn't really feel like swimming, so I just chilled out on the rocks and looked at the sky, looked at some birds, looked at the water. It was amazing. And then we walked a little further along the water. We sat down, and there was a place that sold margaritas.
Yeah.
So I had
like a little shack.
I had a cerveza, and Jill had a margarita. And with those guys,
that hurts right on.
And but just the vibe of being beside water. It's one thing I miss in Kitchener-Waterloo. We don't have a lake or anything like that, but it was a fabulous time. And I'm super happy tonight. Got to thank a lot of people because when we started the podcast up, what the team said initially is let's shoot for a year and see how it goes. Like let's try and get to a year's worth of podcast going. I think it's going amazing. And this is episode 26, which means it's half a year.
I cannot believe it. That just flew.
I know. And we've got lots of good stuff coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful to the co-hosts, all you guys. I'm really grateful to our guests for all that's happening. And so, wow, half a year anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy halfway there, team.
Yeah.
Nice work. Right on. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and we'll catch you on the next one.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.